College basketball is moving into conference play, and that means it's high time we make some predictions for the regular season champions of the Power Six conferences.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and who should be joining me is Leif Thulin, as he does every Thursday. But unfortunately, I'm on the road traveling for holidays. We recorded and there were some technical issues, and so here I am redoing it for you. And so my apologies to Leif and my apologies to all of you who were hoping to hear him today. You're just going to have to listen to me, and I am so sorry. But it's still going to be awesome. We're going to have a great time together, and I'm so glad that you're here. As I alluded to in the cold open, what we're going to do is go through the Power Six conferences and make predictions for you for who will be the regular season conference champs. I've got Leif's predictions, so I'll still share those with you as we go through it. What we're going to do is take two conferences per segment. We're going to go in alphabetical order, so we'll do the ACC and Big 12 because they spell theirs with a 1-2 instead of TWELVE, and then Big East, Big 10, and then we'll wrap up with Pac12 and SEC. And by the way, while we're diving into this, we want your predictions. If you are watching the show, you can just drop some comments on YouTube below who you think will be the regular season conference champs of these leagues and any others, but would also love it if you're listening to share those with us. You can DM us on Twitter, whatever it may be, reach out and let us know your thoughts. By the way, as we go through this, what I'm going to do with you as we go conference by conference is share the odds as they stand right now from our good friends at Bet Online. And so that's one of the ways we're going to kind of shape up this conversation. And for those of you watching on YouTube, by the way, this background behind me, this is very real. I'm touching this tree right now. I'm at my in-laws' house in their living room, and I know it looks fake, but I promise you it's real. Look, this stocking has my name on it. There you go. It's not fake in any way, shape, or form. So anyway, let's get right into this. ACC is where we are starting. As it stands at Bet Online right now, Virginia is the odds-on favorite. They're at 2-1 odds, followed by Duke at 5-2, North Carolina at 4-1, and then Miami at 5-1. Everyone else following that is longer shots. Virginia Tech is fifth at 14-1, and then you get 25 and beyond. And so really it's just those four. And for me, that's the four that I'm looking at. I think it's clearly between those four schools. I had some thoughts about Virginia Tech, but I just don't know that they have the consistency to be able to win over the course of the season, time in and time out. But what I do want to do is look at those five schools: Virginia, Duke, North Carolina, Miami, and Virginia Tech, because I think after that, the conference seems to fall off. There's some schools that could contend. Wake Forest has shown some flashes. They've already beaten Duke. NC State, they've done some things, and Pittsburgh hasn't been awful. And so there's some other things, but in terms of actually winning the conference, really think it'll come from what I believe are this top four. And really I'll add Virginia Tech in as a fifth. Part of the conversation that you have to look at in a big conference like the ACC is there is not a balanced schedule. Each team does not play a true home and home against one another. So what we're looking at, a big part of this conversation is how many times do they have to play each other. Virginia, for example, has just 6 total games against these other 4 schools. So they play Virginia Tech home and home, UNC home and home, but only play at Miami and only play Duke once, and that's at home. That Miami game has already happened. Virginia lost it. So they only have 5 more against what I'm considering the other top 4 schools in the conference. So that's another reason to kind of look at Virginia. As for North Carolina, they have 6 total. Duke, obviously, home and home. Virginia home and home. They only play Virginia Tech away. That's already happened. They lost. And Miami is only at home. And so that's kind of a feather in North Carolina's cap, because when you look at Duke, for example, they've got 7 games out of a potential 8 against those 4 other schools. The only team they play once is Virginia, and that's on the road. So that's not a good sign for the Duke Blue Devils as you look at this. So as for me, I think North Carolina is rounding into shape a little bit. I'm honestly kind of worried about Duke. I think not Still not really seeing it from Dariq Whitehead or Derek Lively, and that is of grave concern to me as I look at this. And so I'm going to take the Virginia Cavaliers as my prediction right now to be the ACC regular season champions, just given the way their defense travels and is able to play game in and game out, even when they don't have their offense at the top of it. The only potential question mark for me right now would be Reese Beekman, who has a banged up hamstring. And so just kind of watching that to see what will happen with him. And then I would go UNC 2, Miami 3, and then Duke 4 is my prediction right now. Moving into the Big 12, the odds at Bet Online right now is Kansas at 2-1 odds. So that's the same as Virginia, followed by Baylor at 9-4 odds, and then Texas 12-5, and it drops off even more after that. At the beginning of the season, I would not have taken the Kansas Jayhawks as my pick to continue their Big 12 dominance. I would have gone with Baylor, is who I had selected preseason. And then as we got into things and saw that Baylor's front court just isn't quite where it needs to be yet without Jonathan Chama Chachua, Flo Thamba's just not really been able to provide the level of front court play that they needed. And as for Keontae George, forming that 3-guard lineup, the true freshman along with Flagler and Cryer in the backfield there, he's been good, but not otherworldly good as I and others expected him to do. And so as the season got into the early part, I was all in on Texas as the Big 12 champion. And I still believe in the roster, but I don't believe in them as a program or team right now because of the Chris Beard mess. And it's just hard to know what to expect or what to see with them. So I'm in kind of a holding pattern with the Longhorns right now. And I still think if they can get it together as a team in terms of the players and can really rally together, circle the wagons, I think they could do it. But Kansas and everything they're doing right now is enough for me to believe in Bill Self's team, who on paper didn't initially seem like the team to do it. I am all in on the Jayhawks now. Jalen Wilson, you've heard me say this a lot, had to take major steps to be if Kansas was going to even sniff repeating as national champions, he had to take a massive leap, and he's done exactly that. Is right now an All-American and part of the conversation for National Player of the Year, if we're being honest. I believe that Grady Dick was an undervalued and underappreciated freshman coming in, and he's proven that already. As for what they've got in the backcourt, I love what Kansas has there as well. And so just the playmaking capability is undervalued. And so I love that. I love what McCullough has as a defender. And so when you mix all that, and again, going back to DeJuan Harris as the guard and the playmaking that he has and able to do those things, coming in with KJ Adams as part of that rotation as well, I'm all in on the Kansas Jayhawks as the number one team in the not in the nation, excuse me, but in the Big 12. And I believe they will be your regular season champions. By the way, I said that I'll give you Leaf's picks as well. And Leaf is in on the Jayhawks as the Big 12 champ as well. Well, next, I want to really look at, is UConn the runaway favorite in the Big East? I believe they are, or is that just what we've seen in the non-conference portion of the schedule? And who on earth is going to come out of this Big Ten bloodbath? I have no earthly idea, but I'll share with you my thoughts in just a moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by Bet Online, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season going on to basketball, they've got it all at Bet Online. So make sure you check out all the lines for these conferences we're looking at and others. It's always the fastest and easiest way to get your sports betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Okay, so next we move into looking at the Big East. As we do so, let me also remind you to check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only we at Locked On can provide for you. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and anywhere else you get podcasts. All right, the Big East odds stand as follows. UConn has the best odds of any Power 6 school to be the regular season champions. It's actually 1-2 odds right now, so you're not getting back as much money if you go with the Huskies, followed by Creighton, second best odds at 9-2, and then Xavier right now 7-1, and then Marquette and Villanova tied at 11-1 odds. For me, this question is not even really looking at other schools. Is UConn legit enough to do what they've done so far this season? And for me, the answer is yes. I believe in everything that you're doing. I believe in Adama Sanogo. I also believe in, for example, when we get to the Big Ten, I'll talk about Purdue not really having a backup to Zach Edey, and that being a big concern for me. But when you look at UConn, for example, if Sanogo has to go to the bench, you bring in this freshman in Donovan Clingan, who has been amazing as a backup, almost averaging a double-double as a backup front court player. And you just don't find dudes like that as you look around the nation. And so to me, that is a massive, massive win for UConn, matching with everything else they're doing. Creighton was my pick preseason. And so that was the thing for me is my bold prediction was Villanova for the second year in a row will not be your regular season Big East champ. I think that's still going to be true, but I had said it was going to be Creighton, and clearly that is not going to be right. Creighton, after that hot start, 6-0, dropped 6 in a row, has won 2 games since, so they're now sitting at 8-6, but I don't see it for the Blue Jays. I think they'll still do well in the Big East, but they to me will not be your Big East champs. Now we're going to find a lot out about them over the course of the coming month. Their next their next 7 straight games are against KenPom top 80 teams. So by the time we turn the calendar to February, we're going to know what Mr. Coach McDermott is working with there at Creighton, and we'll be able to talk more about that. What's interesting to me is that while Villanova got off to that really, quite frankly, miserable start, they're rounding into better shape now. Cam Whitmore, the phenomenal freshman, is back in the fold and really helping change what's going on there. And obviously Kyle Neptune's still finding his way into his first year. We talked about Duke and John Shire earlier. Obviously, I think that's I think John Shire is going to be a great coach, but it is his first year, and it just takes a while to get your sea legs about you. And I think that's true for Kyle Neptune at Villanova as well. And then, I mean, you look around at it, and I just don't, Xavier is doing some nice things. Marquette is a team to watch. I like what Shaka Smart's doing there, but to me, this is the biggest no-brainer of the bunch. I'm going with UConn. They got a little bit of a push on from Villanova on Wednesday night, but ultimately prevailed, did the Huskies, and I just think they're going to be the ones to do it. By the way, Leif's right there with me. He's taken UConn as well. But from here, the final 3 is where Leif and I will begin to diverge a little bit as we move into the Big Ten. If the Big East was the biggest slam dunk of this whole conversation to me, the Big Ten conversation is the biggest of the whole thing, the biggest question mark, because I began the season believing that the Big Ten didn't have any elite teams. Indiana was the highest ranked team in the AP poll preseason at 11th. And I just didn't see much with them or beyond them in terms of high level elite. Now, in terms of breadth and depth, it's absolutely there. The Big Ten continues to be a top 2 conference in the nation, along with the Big 12. Because there's so many solid teams, there's just not any high-level elite teams. Well, then I switched into seeing, similar to UConn, Purdue go from unranked to being now number 1 in the nation, and like, oh, did we misvalue the Boilermakers or what's going on there? Indiana has, I think, been better at times than I thought they would be. and others. Michigan State kind of popped before some unfortunate injuries, like a lot of teams around the nation are dealing with and suffering. And so, as we look at the Bet Online odds, Purdue is at 6-5. They have the best odds right now, followed by Illinois at 11-2 or 11-2 odds. Excuse me. Indiana at 6-1, and then you've got Iowa, Maryland, Ohio State, and Wisconsin all tied at 12-1 odds. Illinois had been a team that I had started to believe in, but their inconsistency forces me to not be able to take them as a regular season champion. I think they could put it together and win like a conference championship or make an NCAA tournament run. But we're talking about regular season champion right now. And Illinois hasn't showed me the consistency necessary to do that. I like some of their players. I think Matthew Meyer, the Baylor transfer, is great, but he's not doing it on a game in, game out basis. Terrence Shannon Jr. from Texas Tech has been really, really good for Illinois, but it's just not enough right now. And I'm not fully out on Illinois, but I'm not fully in either. Indiana, I like a lot, but Jalen Hood-Schifino is another injury issue that's been going on for them, and that gives me some pause. And I hate that, but it is what it is. And same with Xavier Johnson, their guard, who is out with a foot injury right now. And you just don't know how a player recovers from that. Even if he comes back to play, how effective is he this season? And Trace Jackson Davis is the type of player that just can't do it all by himself. As for Purdue, I really like them. Man, just part of the issue there is that I alluded to it a minute ago, Zach Edey. There's just, while he's been so far the national player of the year, absolutely he has. But what happens if he gets in foul trouble or has an injury? They just don't have that depth behind him like UConn does, for example. Another thing is their two freshman guards have been great, Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith, but they are freshman guards and frankly unheralded freshman guards. And that doesn't mean they're not good. It just means, they kind of shocked some people, I think, in the non-conference portion of this season. But I think Big Ten opponents will be ready for that and ready to find some weaknesses to expose. And it just, Big Ten plays is rough and difficult. And so I'm just interested to see how these two true freshman guards hold up to that scrutiny of the slog of Big Ten play. And so while you look at a team like, I know Leif is still, this isn't his choice, but he's a little bit in on Michigan despite the troubles they've had. Wisconsin is a team that, just with the way they play, you never know what might happen from Greg Gard's Badgers. But at the end of the day, Leif is going with Purdue as his pick for the regular season champion. I'm going to go, this is my biggest long shot of all 6 of these selections. I'm going to go with Ohio State. One of the things that Leif and I talked about when we initially recorded this show is if you believe in Bryce Sensabaugh, who's a freshman at Ohio State, then you might be in good shape. And I do. I love Bryce Sensabaugh. I think he's similar to Grady Dick, somebody that's kind of being overlooked nationally, and people are going to start paying attention to as we get into Big Ten play, and somebody that'll really pop on NBA radars, on NBA draft radars, perhaps decently this year, but big time next year. So be on the lookout for that. I know Zed Key is an undersized center at 6'9", but love what he brings to the table. I know right now Ohio State's being led by a freshman guard, Doug McDaniel, but he's just kind of a bowling ball freight train kind of guy. He's undersized, under 6 feet, but just a beefy kid who can get where he wants and do what he wants. So I'm really curious to see with that, and we'll have to keep tabs on what Ohio State is doing and the whole rest of the mess of the Big Ten as well. And then as we get into our final 2 conferences, the Pac-12 and the SEC, can anyone challenge Arizona and UCLA in the Pac-12? I don't think so, but we'll talk about it. And then with the SEC, it's kind of like the Big Ten, a little bit of a mystery. We'll unpack it in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by the NHTSA. Listen, you're hanging out with some friends, putting back a few drinks, which becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to scatter off, you think of calling for a ride, but nah, you live close, you'll be fine. It's no big deal. what are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, or you lose your license, or you lose your job, or you total your car, or worst of all, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, let's move now into Pac-12 play. Let's not mess around with this thing. It's UCLA and it's Arizona. There is no one else that will challenge for the regular season champion. That is, along with UCLA, my second stone cold lock for this thing. The odds: UCLA 11-10, Arizona 7-5 odds, and everyone else is well beyond that. Arizona has the third best odds. This team that just got boat raced by San Francisco a week or so ago. No, it ain't happening. So it's UCLA and it's Arizona. Leif and I are going different ways on this. He is going to take UCLA. I'm taking Arizona. One of the things that Leif has talked about is that he thinks Arizona might be the more talented team, but UCLA might be the more difficult team to prepare for. You look at Tiger Campbell and what he can do in the backcourt. You look at Jaime Jaquez and how he's been able to step up. Last year, he was a little bit injured, and so I think it marred people's image and understanding of what he was capable of, but he is very capable of stepping into that Johnny Juzang role that's been vacated. We're going to have to wait and see what Amari Bailey's able to do, but just several pieces for UCLA make them a really, really great team. And so we're going to keep watching that as well. And I should also mention Jalen Clark. Didn't say his name, but just has been great this season and love that for UCLA. And so if UCLA has the better and more trustworthy backcourt, Arizona, for me, has the better and more trustworthy front court. One of the issues as we look, I should say, at Umar Ballo and Tabelis, and these guys are just so good. The only hesitation for me with that is it's kind of similar to what Auburn struggled with last year down the stretch, is you've got Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler as the best two players on your team and both first-round draft picks. It makes sense. But they were not guys who could create for themselves. And so down the stretch of games, Auburn last year had to rely on their guards because they could not initiate offense with either Kessler or Smith. I worry that Arizona might at times fall into some of that same trap. And if there is a bugaboo that I'm watching out for, it is that, Kurt Kriisa is a little bit of a wild child at times and you can't always trust him. But if they can find that consistency, if they can continue to do what they've done so far this season under Tommy Lloyd, if the offense can continue to be dynamic in those ways, if Courtney Ramey, the Texas transfer, can be a little bit more consistent. You heard my co-host Andy Patton earlier this preseason mention Pelle Larsson as one of his preseason, his bold prediction was Pelle Larsson as Pac-12 Player of the Year. And so if all of that comes together, as I think it will, I really like Arizona as your Pac-12 regular season champion. And I just don't see anyone rising to that level. But here's the thing to watch out for with this conference. These two teams play each other home and home. I believe that they will split those matchups. And so for me, it's not about what they do against each other to help determine the regular season champion. It's how do UCLA and Arizona both perform against the bottom 10 teams in this league. You cannot mess around with Cal or Oregon State, who are both miserable. But it goes even all the way up to teams like Utah, USC, Oregon, Arizona State. You got to take care of business against them. Whoever does that the best at home and on the road is going to be your Pac-12 champion. It's not going to be determined by their head-to-head matchups. That's what I'm going to say right now. Again, Leif going with UCLA. I'm taking Arizona. Let's finish off by looking at the SEC. The BetOnline odds for the SEC: Tennessee leads the way at 9-4 odds, Kentucky 14-5, Bama 7-2, Arkansas 4-1, and then it drops off from there 14-1 for Auburn, 25-1 for Florida, and on down the list. The SEC is the second most difficult of the Power Six conferences for me to decide on. You look at those top four odds: Tennessee, Kentucky, Bama, Arkansas. Obviously, these odds were put out before Kentucky lost to Missouri on Wednesday night. I say lost, got just waxed by Missouri. And by the way, that's the other thing, is we've got these teams like Auburn who went undefeated for a long time this season. I believe in them a little bit less than I do Mississippi State and Missouri, the other two teams that went undefeated for a long time in the SEC. And to that point, Missouri has a couple really good back-to-back wins in recent days. Obviously, I just mentioned that win over Kentucky on Wednesday night it was. And who was it? Right after Missouri lost to Kansas. There's still their only loss of the season. Now, that was a blowout at home. I get that. But then they beat UCF. They beat that Illinois team we talked about earlier on a neutral court, and then took care of Kentucky at home. And so, Missouri might mess around and cause some issues in the SEC as well. We're just going to have to keep our eyes on that. But I do not believe in Kentucky right now. Even though, like, they're you typically think of these John Calipari teams as like, okay, they're young, they're going to put it together. As we continue to go through the season, they're going to find themselves. But this is not a young team. This is a team returning a lot of talent, a lot of players. The reigning national player of the year, for crying out loud, in Oscar Tshiebwe. But some of the other returners haven't stepped up in ways they need to. Jacob Toppin, for example, lost his starting job on Wednesday night. He did not start the Missouri game. Sphere Wheeler just isn't that great of a shooter. His percentages are bad. CJ Frederick hasn't been the dead-eye knockdown shooter that Coach Cal needs him to be. And so I'm out on Kentucky. Arkansas, at full health, they would be my pick to win the SEC. But they're not. Trayvon Brazile is out for the season. He was the most trusted front court player for my money's worth. And then Nick Smith is now back out again, his second injury stint of the season. The guy who, is projected as the top college player coming out in next year's draft. If those guys aren't in, and Brazile won't be, like, he's out for the season, I just can't in good conscience pick Arkansas as my regular season champion. So for me and for Leif, it comes down to Tennessee and Alabama. Leif is going with Tennessee. I'm going with Alabama. Clearly, Tennessee's defense is phenomenal. We both believe in it. We think it allows Rick Barnes and his team to survive the rigors of SEC play, which is what a regular season champion has to do. I haven't seen enough out of Santiago Vescovi so far this season. Julian Phillips, the freshman, is great. But again, that's relying on a freshman that, it's not like elite freshman, just really good. And so the defense is there. I just don't think that Tennessee has enough offense to make it all the way through the SEC as the regular season champion. I think they will contend for it, and I wouldn't be surprised if they won it. But if I'm picking, I'm taking the Crimson Tide. A big part of that is, again, I don't think Tennessee has enough offense. Alabama does, but they also bring that defense with them. That's when Nate Oates' team was so good 2 years ago, when their defense ranked higher. Last year it didn't, and they weren't as good. This year that defense is back, and they're still uber talented offensively. I know there's a little bit of there is variability with relying on the 3-point shot as much as they do, but my goodness, Brandon Miller is such a great freshman, and you pair him with all these other big guys. They have Clowney, another great freshman, and Nate Oates has it going. I know they took a loss to Houston a little bit ago, but I just really think they're going to be able to do a lot of good there. And so, I said Houston. Sorry, it was UConn and Gonzaga who Alabama lost to. They beat Houston. I misspoke. My apologies to all you Cougars out there. And I'll let you determine what I mean by Cougars. But when we look at Bama, I don't think that Brandon Miller, who I and others have compared to Jabari Smith a little bit, I don't think he falls off in the same way that Jabari Smith did last year. He's got enough different types of talents that I think it's just high level, and Alabama will be your SEC regular season champions. All right, folks, there you go. There are Leif Thulin and my picks for the 6 regular season champions of the Power 6 schools. Again, would love to hear your thoughts on these. Please drop it in the comments as you also subscribe. Just takes a second. Would love for you to do that and smash the like button. And also make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today as your second listen of the day. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on Odyssey, YouTube, and anywhere else you get podcasts. A quick scheduling note, no show tomorrow, but Andy and I will be back with you on Monday as we just really get into the thick of conference play in the brand new year. So hope you have a great weekend. Please be safe on this New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and we will talk to you again on Monday. But until then, peace.